Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Patrick Stelina, and recently I had a pleasure to play around with and to create a demo for the newest SampleLogic library, sample library, which is called Rhythmology. And as you can see, this is this instrument. We have here like 4 different loop players, and this is basically how it works. It has 4 separate loop engines. But before I go to the library itself, I'd like to show you the demo track which I wrote, and then I will try to discuss how I use it, how I use this instrument in this particular track. So let me just play it and then I will talk. Okay, so that's it. And let me go back to Rhythmology and I will show you how it works. So basically, as I said, we have 4 different loop engines, and we can play them simultaneously by pressing one key, which doesn't sound really good right now. Let me just switch a preset. Yeah, and we can play every loop separately using these buttons. As you can see, colors are corresponding to colors on a keyboard, so it's really easy to find a particular loop. Yeah, so even listening to those examples, you can immediately see that every loop has like different effects and different settings. And what is really cool about this library, maybe I will just change the preset maybe to the first one. Yeah, that's not bad. So what is really cool about this library is that you can actually, let me just switch off everything else. You can actually go here to this effects module, and here we have like multiple step sequencers. So we have a basic step sequencer for the loop, and here we can like switch off and on particular slices, and we can rearrange the loop like I guess everyone would imagine it should work. So you can basically change a number of slices on every step, and that is how you can change the sound of the loop and the rhythm. And especially if it's a drum loop, you can just change the rhythm. But it's not a drum loop. Let me just find something else. Or you know what? I'm gonna just restart it, because the first loop, which is loaded as default, is I think the best example for this library. Yeah, so here we have a very, very straightforward rhythm, and just using those slices numbers here, we can change the loop. The only thing which actually made me a little bit confused is that we actually don't see change in a thumbnail. So we are not seeing any change in the image of the waveform, which could be, just a little bit confusing, especially if you open this after a while. You would think that here is something really silent, and this may be like a kick or snare, because you can't really see the waveform. This is original waveform, and you can, but I think it's done on purpose, because if you want to know how the loop looks like and which slice you want to choose, you will see actually here the preview. Because let's say I want this sound to be here, and I know this is slice number 7, so I can go here and I can put this slice number 7 here. So now I know it's, this is this slice. So basically that's how it looks. Okay, so the next thing which I want to show you is that you can actually change playback direction, because you can play forward and you can play backwards, and you can play like a ping pong, so it's one forward, one backwards. It's gonna take a long time, but you'll see. Yeah, and now it's playing backwards. Yeah, the only thing that strikes me actually is this grid note. Because I was thinking that I can actually change the speed, how a particular loop is played back, but it looks like I can't change it. Well, or perhaps it is a possibility to change the setting. I just don't know how. Perhaps I just need to open a manual and see it there. I was just too lazy to open the manual, because it's actually it's so easy. It looks very, very easy, and I immediately find out what is what, and I was just discovering this this instrument while I was doing the track. So when I show you some different elements, some different parts which I did, they are made with with different philosophy, because while working on this track, I was discovering some different features in this instrument. So I was changing my my workflow with time. Okay, so going back to the player. Here we have another step sequencer which allows us to just add, just like some changes in panning, and you can transpose every slice. You can add some shutter. You can reverse it. Yeah, and this is great. But what is really crazy, I would say, is this effects chain step sequencer, because it's like another step sequencer which works completely out of sync, I would say, of this from this original step sequencer, because here you can change speed. So basically you can actually create something like a raising effect, or just like evolving loop, or just changing loop per some time frame. And in this case I will change this to 1 bar, so it means that every slice will have effect for 1 bar. So let me just turn this off and I will show you briefly what you can do with it. So let's say I want to use a different effect for every bar. Well, it's not so crazy, so maybe I will just put some distortion on it. Maybe like oh, screamer should be good. Where's screamer? Okay. Yeah, so as you can see, you can literally create almost entire track using this step sequencer, because you can just create like very changing effect for 1 loop. And oh, and by the way, here you can open settings for every effect. So generally you can load like preset for effects chain, for entire effects chain, so you can use some just factory setting, or you can add for every insert, you can add your own effect which you want to use, and then you can just sequence it, use different different count of steps, because you can just make it shorter. You can just create a very straight ahead excuse me, loop, and you can change some settings here on every effect. Like, it's not just a preset, it's not just one setting for effect. You can literally make a very crazy sound with this. Okay, so going back, the same thing actually, what I show you here can be set here. So you can just change amount of steps. So you can basically even create 1 step, so you can use just one, like maybe kick drum, or maybe snare, or maybe just 1 sound from some melodic line, and just change it in time using this step sequencer for effect chain. And this is it, yeah. Yeah, so possibilities are like it's always said that possibilities are endless, but in this case I think it's not overstatement. Okay, so I think that's almost everything about settings of the single playback engine. But what is really great is that we have a separate window for mixing. So if we have many loops, well, 4 loops, we can change volume here, we can add some EQ, and this is actually something what you choose by changing a preset. So you can add like something like thin is I guess it's like a high pass filter. Yeah, and the same, maybe I would just try something here, and low filter would be like fat or something like this. So this is thin. I don't know. Delete, I think not. Mellow? No, not really. Bass boost. Yeah, but it's not cutting the high end. Okay, I think I still have a lot of things to discover here and to learn. But basically, as you can see, we have not only volume settings and panning settings, we have also like master effects. So we can add compression, EQ, saturation, and actually it's like everything else. So you can use any effect which you used here in the step sequencer. You can use the same kind of effect for a master. It's really handy. It's not something what I would expect for from this kind of library, because I'm actually like an old school, and I really like to even to switch off all master effects and just add some compression, some EQ in my DAW directly, like an insert effect or something else. I don't usually use very complicated effects inside of Kontakt, because it's just confusing for me. But if you like it, it's already there, so you can just use it right away. Okay, going back to Playback Engine, and here is actually something what I did at the beginning. When I was starting working on this track, I thought, okay, I don't really like idea of using one Kontakt instance for like different sound elements, different sound sources, I would say. So I would like to keep like drum loops only in one instance, and perhaps some percussion in a separate instance, and maybe some melodic loops in another instance. So this is actually what I did in many cases, but not everywhere. So I basically loaded different loops here using this browser, because you have in this instrument you have two browsers. You have a browser for entire instrument, which allows you to insert every possible preset which is just made by SampleLogic. So you can choose a different, as you can see, I have already marked some presets as favorite. I was just, you know, looking for something interesting, and I was marking it just to make this track. And besides that, you have here another browser which allows you to look for single loops, and this is actually something what I did most of the time. I was looking for separate loops, for single loops, and I was using those tags. So basically, when I needed a guitar, I would just go by click here and just look for a guitar sound. Or if I was looking for drums, I would just pick a drum kit, or maybe drum and bass, because it's like a similar thing, I guess. And I was loading this kind of loops in separate engines, and I was like designing an instrument for me to work on this track. So I was creating like I can even show you here drum fills. It's a separate track, and here's lo-fi drums, which is a separate track, and it has like 4 different loops, which I will show you briefly. But there is one last thing which I need to show you, because this is really crazy, especially if you don't have any idea what you want to do and you're just looking for inspiration. There is a random button. And this random button is really exciting, because this is something where perhaps I don't know every Kontakt library, but this is actually something what I didn't see in any other product. You can switch here what you want to randomize. So in case you choose a loop, which is great and you love it, and you just want to randomize some settings, you can just turn off this loop source and loop core and just add randomization for everything else. Did I did it right? Loop pattern, loop steps, yes. loop source and loop core is turned off. So now when I randomize it, it should keep the same loop, but change every other setting. I think it's not the best example because it's not really interesting. But believe me, sometimes just by randomizing this, you will actually get something really crazy. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, just you can just find like a piece, like a short element, a short piece which makes you happy, and then just play around with it and create something new. Okay, so let me just go back to the track, and I will show you separate elements, and I will show you how I use the Rhythmology. So basically, I started actually with something which is not there anymore, which is the guitar loop. I thought that I will start this track by using this loop. Yeah, and I even made some very, very simple sequencing here. As you can see, I have playing one loop and then just repeating the note. But eventually I decided to take it off, because when I was using this loop, I was just like playing this around for a couple of minutes, and then I was trying to add something else, and then I discovered then I just got an idea of creating this piano loop, which became like a you know, like a main hook for this track. And this piano is actually made by myself, because I was looking for something that I couldn't find in Rhythmology, because this is, we all have to be aware of that, and sometimes you just can't find something particular you want. And the product like Rhythmology for me is actually very inspiring instrument, because I can, like in this case, and this is the perfect example, because I can just play around with the loop. I can just play a loop and try to add something else to the track, just build the track around it, and then I discover that this loop is, like, you know, no longer needed in this particular place in the track. So I can just switch it off, and everything else is bit. But the source of the idea is the loop, and I can imagine that some of you may have the same situation, that you just play around with one loop, and then you just figure out that it's no longer needed because everything else it's taking over the track. But I actually use that loop, but a little bit later here. So let me just show you how it looks inside of Contact. I will just switch this off again. Yeah, so in Contact, I created only one. I actually left. Sorry, not created. I left one Playback Engine, because I switched. As you can see here, I switched off everything else, and this is really handy because you can switch off. Playback Engine, and you can save some RAM, because every Playback Engine comes with some other loops. So when you switch it off, you're just basically saving RAM. So this is what I did in many cases. So you will see some other tracks with only one Playback Engine. But what is cool about this is that while I was working on the track, I discovered that we have like, you know, like, this is like a very obvious thing, but I just it was totally new thing, totally new instrument for me. So I was just like looking around, and I discovered that we have cards, and we have cards here. We can create 4 cards, and we can copy and paste every feature of every card. So we can copy effects, we can copy step sequencing from one card and paste it to another. So basically what you can do, you can make one loop, and like you can make 4 different versions of one loop in one Kontakt instance, and basically in one Playback Engine, and it's really handy to play with, because you can switch those cards, you can switch those versions by key switches. So here are key switches, and when I play the loop, I can switch card by key switch. Yeah, so so it's really useful, because sometimes, especially if you create an arrangement like in this case, you want to change something in time. You don't want this loop to be exactly the same for, you know, like 4 minutes. And I was actually using this loop in some other ways. And basically, when I have a break in a track, where is it? Where is the break? Yeah, it's here. Here's the first break. So this is the place when I no, sorry, here. Here is the first time I played the loop, and it's not a break. It's my fault. It's not a break. Yeah, it's just playing in the background, but with the piano and with everything else, you can't really hear it so obviously. But here in a break, it's a little bit louder. And I play it only with some scratches beneath. So I was actually using this full loop with some effects here, and it's played backwards. And after that, I changed the playing. Yeah. And here we have this version, and I was actually, I think, because I can't remember everything right now, but I think that I was trying to make some room in the mix for some other instruments, perhaps a bass or maybe a kick drum or something else. And I was looking for some places in this loop that I can just turn off to make it more rhythmic, to make, you know, just more groovy, and to make some place in the mix at the same time. And after all, I changed it again, and I guess here I used the last. No, this is the full loop. So where do I use the last? Maybe I don't use the last setting. Yeah, but basically what is important, that you can just, you know, create 4 different versions of the same loop. And even if you use multiple engines actually, and if you load the same loop to every engine, you get like 16 different versions of the same loop. So this is something what I think everybody could create a track using just one instance per one loop. If you have like 16 versions of the same loop, so you can really create crazy arrangement. Okay, so this was the first element which I created, and then I just, you know, playing around with it and just figure out that I needed some more, and I was thinking about some old sounding piano. So I created this this element actually by myself using a Giant from Native Instruments, and I just added some distortion and some isotope vinyl, as you can see in here, to make it sound old. Yeah, so it's basically like it's so stupid. Yeah, but this track should be funny and stupid, so it's okay. And then I just bounce it, and here you can see that I just slice it to many pieces, and just used you know, some different variations of the same loop. So I just reversed time, and perhaps I create a shutter by myself. And yeah, actually For the first time when I was playing with the Rhythmology, I thought, well, man, this would be great if I could just put my loop inside of this engine, because it could be really, really interesting. But I think we all just used to it, that the contact instrument is like a, like an one box instrument which you can't really open, and you can just use everything what is inside that box. So this is something what we all need to expect from, I think, almost every contact instrument. Okay, so going back to the track and some different elements. Let me show you the drum. Yeah, because the drum is very interesting, and I actually spent, I think, much time designing drum loop. And let me just play this back. It sounds really, really simple, but as I said, I spent some time just to find, excuse me, I need to drink a coffee. I needed some cool sounding drum loop, so I was looking for different sounds, and basically what I ended up with is this main rhythm. And as you can see here, looking on those steps, I didn't change much. I actually just took a kick drum and put it right there, so I have like 2 kicks, and then the loop goes on as it were. And I just I turned off every effect which was on this element, so I just needed to have like a very, very clean drum loop. And then I added some other elements, and I added 2 drum loops which are actually filtered. And it's panned also. Yeah, so I have, like, when you play it simultaneously, it's really cool because it's so wide. You have 2 different loops on sides, and I use just a mixer. So I just pan this to the right, this one to the left, and I use EQ preset with thin. So it's, as I said, it's like a high pass filter. So I use that just to make a room for kick and snare. And after all, I decided to add one more snare because there was something missing. And I just created this thing, which, as you can see, it has only 1 step, and this is just a snare. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is just a snare, and it's just playing this like this forever. Because I needed some more punch. And eventually, actually, when I was building entire arrangement, I just decided to add even more. So I was, I added just the samples. But the basic rhythm and the idea of the rhythm was created with Rhythmology, and then I just decided to add a little more punch by adding those samples and the snare. Yeah, and it works, I think, nice. It's not a style of the music which I do every day, so perhaps there are some mixing mistakes, but I think it's quite okay. Yeah, so this is the rhythm. And then I was looking for some percussion, and especially for bongos. I'm crazy about bongos, especially in music like that. When I first launched the Rhythmology, I felt like a teenager again because I discovered those funky loops which I already loved. And I felt like a teenager again, because when I was a teenager, I was actually doing music like this because I was inspired by the music at that time. It was like late 90s, and I was just inspired by artists like Fatboy Slim, Chemical Brothers, Prodigy, Junkie XL as well, especially because of his remixes, and I had like like a band with my friend, and we were doing this kind of music, this kind of music in late 90s, using some very, very simple software, music software. It was pretty crazy. Today we could do much more, I guess, especially having something like this, like Rhythmology. It's just so perfect for this kind of music. Okay, so going back, I had a hi-hat, and it's just like that. So I was actually, when I created the rhythm, this main drum loop, I was looking for something what could play simultaneously with this loop, and I'd fight with this loop for a room in a mix, and something what could emphasize the rhythm. And this is actually, I think, perfect solution. Because it's the hi-hat is playing open. Hi-hat is playing like in every second step. And as you can see here, I have 3 loop engines activated. 4th is disabled. So this is the first variation. This is the second variation, which I used in a couple of places. And this one is actually something what I was about to use, but I finally didn't use, I guess, because I don't hear it anywhere. Yeah. I can't really tell because it's just so many elements, and I was doing this while I was discovering the library, so I was getting to know this instrument, and I was building the track, so it was pretty crazy. Okay, so here we have a bongo, and how does it look? Yeah, so this is a bongo, and what is this one? Yeah, the same bongo but with the shutter. Yeah, another variation. Oh, and this is actually example of what I thought would be the best solution was that when I started working on the track and before I discovered cards. So basically, as you can see here, I loaded the same loop to every Playback Engine, and I was trying to use this as building arrangement elements. But then when I discovered those cards, when you can add it here, and use just 4 different versions of the same loop, I think it's a better solution because it's much faster. If you try to load, well, this idea is not bad at all, but it's much, I think, much more time consuming, because you have to find a particular loop every time. You have to load it manually. You can't copy and paste elements in between those Playback engines. So I think it's much faster to copy and paste the same loop and just put this on different card and then just rearrange this. Yeah, but as I said, it was a trial and error actually. Yeah, so here we have another bongo, and I guess it's just yeah, I think it's almost the same or the same. That's odd. Yeah, I think, yeah, I just duplicated the track and I changed only one. That is why it's so similar. Okay, so here we go with some Latino Percussion. Oh, yeah. So I suppose I have only one loop here. Yeah, this is only it. And what do we have here? And actually, in many cases, because I forgot to show you this, in many cases I was doing some step sequencing for effect chains. But sometimes, like in this case, I had a screamer turned on with a preset, and then I just decided to take it off. So I should actually just turn off here. But I was actually doing much of this, not like very complicated stuff, but I was just adding a little interesting accents. So perhaps like some high pass filter on some elements, or just like a flanger, like in this case, or just like a screamer, or maybe some compression to make some slices to be a little bit more louder and fatter. And in many cases, actually, when I go here to melodic loops, I will show you that I also used tuning a lot, just to make it fit to the track. Okay, so I think that's it. And it was the last percussion element, and I also used some effects. Here is effect which I bounced. This is something what I think the contact. I think a contact has a problem with sync, and maybe it's only a Cubase issue. I'm not really sure because I only use Cubase, but I saw this in many other contact libraries which are loop based. So I just discovered that there are sometimes. Occasionally there are some syncing problems. So with this loop I had a problem, and I just decided to bounce it and just to quantize the audio because it was much faster. Yeah, but it is actually Rhythmology loop, which is here. It's just disabled. And I also used some bass here just to make something interesting in this feel. Yeah, and as you can see here, I just pitch this a little bit so it fits to my track key. And this is really handy because in Rhythmology itself you can transpose separate steps here, and which is very cool, especially if you want to change some melodic loop to work for your track. But if you want to change a key, I didn't find actually anything what can just change a key like for entire loop. So I think the fastest way is just to slide over this knob, and yeah, and it doesn't change any tempo. It's just really pitching the every slice separately, so it's really cool, and I use that a lot in melodic loops. Okay, so let me show you something else. Here we have guitars. So the first guitar I already showed you, so let me just show you this pulse. Yeah, so this is pretty straightforward. I didn't even change anything here. The only thing I did is just panning, so it's bouncing like a ping pong, and that's it. I didn't even create any effect chain, so just simple loop. I needed something playing high just to feel the mix a little bit better. That is why I used that. And I also used some scratches, like vocal scratches, and actually this is something what I miss in this library, and in particular me, because perhaps you won't feel that, but I was looking for some vocals. Especially for this track. I think it could be good to use some vocal elements just in few places, and there are almost no vocals in Rhythmology. I guess there is only one loop which contain like a real vocal, like some guy telling something, and this is the only loop which sounds like a vocal recording. But everything else based on vocal is more like scratches, like in this case. Yeah, so it's let me show you. Yeah, so I just used some slices, and I probably I used some preset and perhaps just changed something here because it doesn't look like me. I wouldn't. I think I wouldn't add so many steps. So I guess it was just a preset and I changed something. Oh, okay. And what is really cool about the step sequencer? Maybe I will show you this in my overview track, because I forgot to tell you this. And this is really, really cool. Which loop can I use? Perhaps I will just, yeah, I will just reset here everything. Yeah, and as I already told you, we can change speed of this effect chain sequencer, step sequencer, but there's something more we can actually do. If you have perhaps a little bit faster playback, yeah, and let me just change this to something more drastic like screamer. I always have a problem with finding screamer. Okay, yeah, so maybe just give it more, everything more. Yeah. So we can not only turn on and off a particular effect, we can also sequence effect. I think it's like intensity here, and then you get this this icon of sequencing. Yeah, so we can just create something like this. So we can not only use effect per step, we can also change its intensity. Yeah, so maybe growing something, or yeah, you can just draw. This is, I guess, handy. Yeah, so this is really really useful, especially if you want to, you know, get some various sounds, just to make the loop not so repeatable, and just to avoid any boring things. And there is one more element which I missed, which is a drum fill, and this is something what I actually used by creating this like custom preset with 4 different fill loops. So I was just looking for, you know, I was just looking for fills. I have here I have fills already marked. So this is the first, second. Yeah, so I only have fills here, and I changed this maybe slightly, this one, but everything else is almost exactly the same as the loop is. I also, in many cases, I disabled all effects because I wanted to have a clean loop. In this case, I have some twang. But what I was trying to achieve is to create for me like a custom loop builder which I could use to create fills. So in every fill in a track, I have some different combinations. Sometimes it's just one loop, sometimes it's sometimes it's sequenced with others. Like in this case, I have 3 different loops combined. Yeah. And this is great. This is how I love to work with loops. I like to you know, just rearrange them. This is how I like to work, especially with drum loops. But there is also one more thing which you need to know, and this is something what I think, again, this is a contact issue in Cubase. Perhaps it's not an issue in other DAWs, but with contact in Cubase, if you have loops, in many cases I discovered in other libraries too that when I have like different loops playing back, I have to create this gap between notes, because if I left this like here, I would get silence. You see, there need to be some gap, and I remember every time I use Evolve, which is a more like cinematic library, and it's kind of old, but I still use it. When I use Evolve, I also have to create this, to leave this little gap between notes, because it's just creating this silence. I'm not sure why it worked that way. Okay, so let's go to melodic loops again. I already showed you 2 guitars, and there is one more. Excuse me. There is one more guitar, and it's in here. And actually, this is the same loop. It is just played forward. In every other place in track, this loop is actually playing backwards, and in this case, it's playing forward. Yeah, and most of the time you will hear this in that way. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, and we also have some scratches. We also have some scratches here, some vocal scratches. Yeah, so I just took this loop and I just rearrange some slices and I make it shorter. I'm not really sure how it looked at first when I loaded the preset. I can't really tell because I just don't remember how much I changed, and there are so many settings, so it's really difficult sometimes to recall what you did on the track. And the last thing I used from Rhythmology was this Mallet loop. Yeah, and I think this is the only loop, only melodic loop which I didn't actually tune, because it just fits perfectly to the key of the track. Yeah, and I only added here, as you can see, I only added few other elements which I was missing, and one of them is bass. And actually, bass, it's not like that I missed the bass in Rhythmology, because there are some bass loops, but I just decided to create a bass right away. I just decided to create a bass by my own because I like to work that way. Bass is something what I think, in my opinion, is something that I need to have a control, and I know what I wanted, and I have like some favorite presets which I use for bass. So I most of the time use the same preset, just change a little bit some filtering and perhaps some other settings. But in this case, I just use the massive, and I used the bass which I like. And one more thing I created by myself is this synth line. And this is something what I created by myself, not only in terms of melody, but I also created the preset by myself. I mean, I just designed the sound. I was actually looking for something what could sound like TB-303. It's a very classic Roland synthesizer. And I don't have any plugin, because actually I don't do this kind of music anymore. I'm more in like cinematic music, so this was like going back home for me. But still, I was looking for some sound to imitate TB-303. I didn't have any plugin like this. I have Rebirth from Propelheart, but it's 32-bit, and it's I don't remember where I have it. I was trying to download this, but it turns out that they are no longer giving this away. So I just decided to create something on my own, and I just opened Massive, and I just used one oscillator, then second one with the same shape, just tuned it down, and I was just changing cutoff and resonance, and that's it. and there is a clipping, and it's nothing to it. And I also I even named this TB303 version 1 because I was trying to develop this, and I thought I will change it eventually. But it doesn't sound like TB, but it's not so bad actually. But still, it's sometimes it's really cool to design sound by yourself, because it's just something that no one else can. Well, it's very simple to replicate because it's simple setting, but I guess it's just it's always up to you how you set up particular effects like clipping or cutoff or resonance, and it sounds original. And it's much faster actually. Yeah, and sometimes it's really much faster, especially if it's a simple sound. It's much faster to create the setting of the synthesizer by your own than just browsing hundreds of presets. I found myself very bored while browsing presets, and sometimes I just decide to create something new because it's faster. Okay, and there is one more element which I also made by myself, and I made by myself meaning I created a synth patch by myself for Rise, because this is something what I was missing. And this is Omnisphere with some step sequencing. Yeah, so I have just like, let me just play it back again. Yeah, so I just have a step sequencing in Omnisphere for with LFO sync change, so it's wobbling. And I guess it's just a sine wave with some distortion. And the last thing is a guitar riff, which I added only because I needed something more, and it's not really obvious when you listen to the track, but I was looking for some other guitar loop in Rhythmology, and I just decided to create something else, because those guitars in Rhythmology have, like, you know, different styles. You have tons of styles in there, and I was looking particularly for something that sounds a little bit more funky, and there are not many other funky loops, so I just decided to create this, the wah effect, which I just automated. And this is actually just a simple wah-wah from Cubase, nothing fancy, as you can see. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that's it. The second synth, which you can see here, it's actually the same. It's the same patch. I just played this a little bit lower. I think it's octave lower, and I automated differently cutoff and resonance. Here is my cutoff, as you can see, very complicated. This is my cutoff and resonance automation, and in the main loop it's a little bit more interesting, but I just wanted to create something what will make the synth sound a little bit stronger, because it was a little bit, I thought it's too weak, so I just created this underline of the same synth to be like 1 octave lower. And yeah, and that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope I didn't waste your time. Make sure to check out Rhythmology on SampleLogic website, and hope to see you soon.